I've seen some of the fans say recently, with characters like Philip in Studios and Annie Wershing's character taking a much bigger part in 24. Kiefer almost seems to be taking a slight step back. Would you agree with that? Do you think it's intentional? Especially like last season with the stem cell thing.
You know, look, the hardest thing for any television show, and 24 is no exception to it, is to write for your lead characters. You know, and that's why, you know, and especially on shows where you have a guest star every week, you're doing Mystery of the Week. If you notice, on a lot of those shows, the lead characters do the same exact thing. You know, they're rarely part of the story. Maybe 1 or 2 episodes, CSI will involve their people, or the NCIS, or any of these. So basically, the writer gets to work with a new character every week with that guest star, and they're usually way better written than the leads, because the leads are the leads. They're going to do the same thing on CSI. Our show's a little different because it's a continuing storyline, but it does get a little dry to keep writing for the same people. 2 best examples: Lost and Heroes, right? They didn't even wait 1 year. In year 2, they were ready. Lost completely introduced a new cast in year 2, completely, because they were already out of ideas for what they were going to do with their 10 people that they had. So Heroes, same thing. You know, both shows went through the same problem, and now what are they doing? They're both going back to, okay, we're going back to our original people, because you realize that's why people are watching. You've sold them on those 10 people. That's who they want to see. They don't care about the other people on the island. They care about those 10 people. And so the problem is, for writers, is it's just so much easier because you write yourself into a corner after a while. You've done so many things with Jack to come up with another one, you know, and that was kind of our mistake in season 6, is that, you know, being the softest of the seasons, is that we tried so hard to come up with something completely different for him that we came up with the family, you know, and that's what sort of that became. And not our downfall, but it hurt us a little bit, you know. And instead of just saying, this is who he is, this is what he does, and it's a little repetitious, but that's it. But we tried to inject the family back into it because it gave him the personal stake. It made him different than every other crime fighter on TV because he had a personal stake in it, which is why year 1 worked so fantastically. Was that not only was he trying to stop a kidnapping, he had his daughter running around LA at night. Any parent, you know, me watching that with teenage boys at the time, I'm like, okay, I get what this guy's going through, you know, and maybe I don't have his job, I'm not trying to stop an assassination, but I got my own job, and if I had both of those coming at me, how would I deal with it? So they've constantly throughout the years tried to keep that alive. And even if you look at the criticism of Kim, you know, and you know, why Kim? Well, it's his only family. You know, it's his only blood. It's the only thing that can anchor him and not make him this wild, vengeful, rogue kind of character. Because as much as those guys are kind of interesting to look at, not for 24 hours. They get boring after a while, you know. It just gets boring to watch people just, you know, take out their revenge on somebody.
I mean, probably a difficult question. If you were still involved on the show, what would you have done differently in these first 4 episodes?
You know, it's really funny because obviously that comes to mind as I think about it, and directing is such a, it's a nuanced thing. It's a very gray kind of, you know. Look, I look at those shows; they're both really well directed. You know, both first parts. Mile and Brad, they know the show, they know what to do. But it's just the little details, and you know, even from Joseph's point of view, Joseph Hodges, our former production designer, it's the little details that him and I, without talking to anybody, you know, just ourselves, would be going, we'd never do that. You know, there were just rules that we set up in our own world as to trying to keep it true as we could. There were just things that we would never do, you know. And so seeing some of those, and I don't really want to point them out. I don't want to be that guy. But there are those little things that I just go, okay, that was good, but ooh, I would have done that. You know, I would have just taken that. You know, not that much off the script. You know, so that I noticed, and then the idea that I was a big part in the way the show was written, only as the devil's advocate. You know, only the guy that would go in and go, we can't do this. You know, we can't shoot her in the leg because we shot her in the leg already. So it was that kind of, you know, we did that already. Let's come up with something different. So, you know, that was always my job there. And it was kind of not the greatest job in the world because you got a lot of resistance from the writers, but that was almost always my job. So I'm not sure if anyone has stepped into that spot or not. I'm not there, but I could see some of the things where I would have gone in there and went, there's no way I'm shooting this. We better come up with something different. So that's, you know, some of what I'm seeing.
It's
Without
good to know
sounding like sour
there
grapes,
are
because I don't
things,
mean it to.
Yeah.
You know, I still think it's a great show
Yeah.
and they're doing great work.
So as a fan, where would you like to see the rest of season 8 go?
Well, the only thing that really bothered me, I guess, is the second I heard nuclear, and I'm just
I saw you
like,
tweet about that.
yeah, I'm just like, oh, you know, and again, I just see myself sitting in the office, reading it for the first time. I would have done the same thing. I would have gone right to Howard and the guys that went, oh, come on, we can't do this again, you know? And I know it's maybe a little different, but we did the nuclear bomb in a suitcase. We did the, you know, the nuclear this, and I don't know. I'm not interested. And the biggest thing about it, of course, is the fear factor has kind of gone away a little bit. You know, because this country isn't as scared as it used to be when we first started. You know, in season 1, when we were right on the heels of 9/11, in fact, shooting during 9/11, that, you know, that fear isn't there anymore. So you say those kind of things, and people just go, oh yeah, it's not that big a deal. It's just somehow not that big a deal. So I think that's the only thing that's disappointing to me. Hopefully it'll take a turn, which it always does. So it'll take a turn away from that would be great for me. I would love to see that as a fan.
So if season 8 is the last, where would you like to see 24 finish?
Well, I will be completely greedy and say that I would like to see it finish in a place that we can make movies and I can be part of the movies. And which is, you know, they're talking about that again. You know, we haven't talked about it for a couple of years, and that conversation is back in play again. So, you know, look, when I first started this, both Kiefer and I used to do interviews all the time and say, he's got to die. I mean, if nothing else, it's punishment for the rogue, kind of ugly life he's led. It's almost for Penn, you know, he's got to die. But then the movies came along, and we're like, no, he shouldn't die. so I think just from a greedy standpoint, I would just love to see, I'd love to see us do movies. I mean, it would just be so much fun to be not handcuffed the way we are on the show in a couple of different ways. One, with the budget, you know, and two, with the real time. I mean, obviously a movie wouldn't be anchored with real time, or maybe half of it would. That's what they were talking.
I think we discussed this when we
exactly. We discussed that. So it would really be fun for me to do, and I would, you know, love to work with Kiefer again. He's still, to this day, one of the best people I've ever worked with, and why not want to work with people that you really love? And so I love working with him. So I would love for that to happen. So I'm greedy and hoping that he will ride into the sunset, or you know, some kind of ending that'll launch us into the movies. Is what
I mean, if season 8 is going to be the last, they haven't made a decision yet, or more that we know. Right? How do you think that's going to affect the storyline? Because if suddenly they decide that's the end.
Well, people have asked me that too. But if you think about how you look, they never know what the new year is going to be, anyways. When we end our show, I mean, they never have. Every single one of our cliffhangers were cliffhangers to us too. You know, however we ended the year, we never had even a clue as to how we were going to start the next year. So however they end it, whatever they do, minus killing him, which they won't do, I'll guarantee you that they won't do that. And we faked his death way too many times now to actually pull it off again. But whatever they do, we'll be able to. We'll be able to write some explanation that'll get you to the movie.